All right, folks, are we ready to start? You ready, Becca? Let's do it. Okay, this is Susan Blunt. I am one of the NOC co-directors. Becca Zirkin's on hand too. She'll be speaking to you in a minute. And I just want to say, first of all, a big welcome. It's great to have everybody here tonight. And appreciate all the new people we have from Wake County in particular, and quite a few people from out of states. But really appreciate your support. It's fun to have some new faces on the Zoom with us. So since we do have some new people, I'm going to spend a few minutes reviewing a little background on Neighbors on Call, what our goals are. And let me just say that Neighbors on Call was founded in 2016. Probably don't need to explain why it was that year, with these particular goals. We want to promote progressive policy in the state government in North Carolina. We want to build an engaged and informed community of activists with the purpose of electing more Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. We get together. We get together. Becca, are you going to put the slides up?
Oh, yes, I am.
It's okay. We're having a lot of changes at the last minute. You remember, any of you read Grace Paley's book, Enormous Changes at the Last Minute? That's the way this feels sometimes. Anyway, with the purpose of electing more Democrats. We get together virtually these days, but thank goodness we have that. We learn together and we act together. Voter outreach is our specialty. In 2018, we knocked on more than 15,000 doors and helped Representative Everett get elected. And in 2019 and 2020, we started with canvassing, but needless to say, had to pivot to phone banks. But in that 2-year period, we staffed a total of 3,377 shifts for canvasses and phone banks, focusing in particular on 5 North Carolina House candidates, including Ricky Hurtado in Alamance and Terrence Everett, who is currently serving in the North Carolina House. Now, reminder for those of you who may be new to us, our focus, the Neighbors on focus, is only on the North Carolina state government, specifically the legislature. We don't get involved in any of the federal elections or federal congressional seats. Now, not only do we want to help, let me back up a minute. We have had mentioning little late breaking news. It seems that our dear House is still in session. And so we may have a little trouble getting Representative Everett here tonight on time. So in a minute, we'll fill in on the latest plan, but sorry to let you know that, just a little early warning. Okay, so not only do we want to help elect Democrats, we want to keep them in office. In particular, we want to help keep Representative Everett. Now, at this point, I was going to be introducing him, but he's not here. So Becca, do you want to say something about Representative Everett at this point? I could still describe him.
I think it would be great to know a little bit about Representative Everett and the background information about the legislature, and then we'll move ahead with our backup plan.
Okay, all right. So let me just say, for those of you who may not know Representative Everett, that he did flip his seat, House District 35 in northeastern Wake County in 2018, and thank goodness was elected again in 2020. He has a law practice in Wake Forest, representing other small businesses, and he's a champion. Becky, you want to move the slide, advance the slide? He's a champion for fully funding schools, expanding Medicaid, nonpartisan redistricting, certainly a key topic today, and many other important things. We are very grateful to have him here in the legislature. Representative Everett, if you were here right now, we'd be saying thank you for, actually you're there right now instead of here. So stay tuned. We'll be turning the floor over to him should he be able to eventually join us, or someone else soon. So stay tuned for that. Now, looking at quick status check on the North Carolina legislature. How close are the Republicans to regaining the supermajority in 2022? It was such a big deal when we were able to break the supermajority a few years ago, because that meant then our representatives could turn over support the governor's veto. If he wanted to veto legislation, the Republicans could not overturn his veto. But it's close right now. You look, we are 2 seats short from supermajority in the Senate chamber, and 3 seats short in the House chamber. So that's a bit close for comfort. All the more reason why we want to make sure that we keep Representative Everett in his position. So now, all the reports that we have from other states, the states have been successful in these endeavors. We learned that it's very important to have year-round contact with voters, not just during the election year, not just in the few months before the election, but year round. It's really key to electing Democrats and to keeping them in office. But it's also a challenge. The incumbents definitely want to engage with their constituents. That's not the issue, but it's hard to manage that effort on top of everything else. The legislative position may be described as part-time, but it's, as we can see, particular tonight, it's anything but that. So to do that on top of keeping their regular job is really a challenge. And given that the pay, I'm embarrassed to say that North Carolina only pays our legislators $13,000 a year. So the legislators do need to keep their primary job as well, in addition to serving for us in the House. Not to mention that in off years, many of the legislators do not have a campaign manager. So to support the kind of efforts for year-round connections with their voters, it's a tough thing for them to do without a campaign staff. So to help these people out, these people who are very important to us, we are developing a toolkit, a template for year-round voter contact to support them and to make it easier for them to reach out to their constituents on an ongoing basis. So Becca, I'll turn it over to you now to tell us more about this toolkit and anything else that might be happening now.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Becca Zirkin. I am the other director of Neighbors on Call. So I do want to tell you about the toolkit, and also I'll just let you know now that as of now, Terrence Everett is still in the budget meeting. And if that changes, of course, he would really love to talk to us. But his former campaign manager from last year, Vicky Suflita, who any of us who worked with his campaign last year know quite well, is here. And so after I talk for a minute about what this toolkit is about, she's going to be able to answer some questions for us about Terrence's district, which is important for us knowing how to be great callers. So as Susan said, launching a voter outreach program it takes effort no matter what, no matter how you slice it. And the goal here for this toolkit is to make it as easy as possible for a legislator with the help of a lead volunteer to get early voter contact started using best practices. So what we are putting together and what you are going to be helping us practice with a run through during these phone banks is so you'll be helping with some of the pieces, but there's lots more pieces going on behind the scenes. So a suggested list of a few key volunteer roles that need to be filled, a to-do list that covers everything from creating a mobilize event to following up with voters, suggested criteria for which voters to contact, which is really important, and we're going to talk more about that later. Suggested scripts to start from, volunteer recruitment and communication strategy, training instructions for volunteers, information about where to get support with all of those things. So there's going to be a lot that should help get things going. And we are very grateful to Representative Everett and the volunteers in his district for doing this trial run with us to work out as many kinks as we can work out in these 5 phone banks. So there's a reason why Representative Everett's district is a great place to do this. First of all, he's very excited about doing it. And we at Neighbors on Call already have a relationship with him from previous elections. He doesn't have a ground game launched yet, and he does want to get one started. And making calls in House District 35, Terrence's district, is a good use of your volunteer time in and of itself, because it's potentially a vulnerable district depending on what happens with redistricting. And we really do need to keep Representative Everett in office. We're also really fortunate that Amy Cox and Bree Bro volunteered to work with Neighbors on Call on this project. And you may know them as the founders of the volunteer voter outreach organization, FlipNC. So FlipNC has been on hiatus since the election. And in the meantime, Amy and Bree volunteered to join us in working on this toolkit. And they're very experienced with voter outreach, both during election years and off election years. And like Neighbors on Call, they feel very strongly that the volunteer experience and the community building should feel really positive and fun so that everyone wants to come back and keep doing it. And Amy and Bree also bring a very sharp focus on how to use data effectively. So we're going to talk more about that later. In the meantime, we have Vicki Suflita here. And Vicki, are you able to unmute yourself?
How's everyone doing?
Yay!
Hey. Where are you?
We miss you. And anyone who volunteered with Representative Everett's campaign in the fall certainly remembers you well. Thank you so much for filling in while Representative Everett is at the legislature. We would love for folks to know a little bit more about the district. So I know you're coming on totally last minute, which is very nice of you to be so game. So I'm just going to throw some questions to you about the district. Can you, and if there's something that's outside of your thing, just tell us. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in 2016, in 2018, and 2020 in Terrence's district? And how, I don't know if you know the redistricting piece, but like what could happen in 2022 possibly?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, so excited to see you all. I see a lot of familiar faces, and Terrence absolutely, and I absolutely love you all, like made such a huge difference in 2020, tens of thousands of phone calls. Like it really, really made a huge difference in this district. So had to start by saying thank you because I had my moment, but yeah, in terms of how the district has changed a bit over time and sort of where we are currently. In 2016, so Terrence has now run 3 times. In 2016, unfortunately, his Republican opponent won with 53% of the vote. So it was a close race. I think everyone was very, of course, shocked by what happened in 2016, both in Terrence's district and in the country. So, but it was definitely, it was a really close race there. In 2018, he won, which was great news. Definitely benefited from Trump not being on the ballot and having it be a year where there's not as much turnout just generally. So he won with 51% of the vote, 51.9% in 2018, which was really great. And then in 2020, there was some redistricting. His district shifted slightly, got a tiny bit worse, I guess worse we'll say, for Terrence. And he ended up winning with 50.67% of the vote. So it was very close. The race definitely benefited from having a third-party candidate run that was a little more conservative. So, and the fact that Terrence's opponent this past year was really extreme in his conservative views. So that I think turned off some of the voters in the district who overall are quite moderate. I think it is definitely trending more towards Democrats, but you still, I mean, especially around Wake Forest, Rollsville, it's, you know, predominantly white, middle class, upper middle class. And so there is kind of a hesitance to vote for a Democrat sometimes with those voters, at least in that area. So it's a very moderate voting pool, and you really, you know, Terrence has done a really great job of appealing to his district. But yeah, I mean, it's nerve-wracking. That's why every single call makes a huge difference. So yeah, once again, very grateful to the work you all put in last election and in the future. It'll be great.
Thank you for that. And we have a few more questions for you, but also Terrence's wife, Jen, is here. And if we could unmute Jen, I know that, first of all, we're very grateful that you're here. We know you have 2 kids at home and you're busy and you were not prepared to do this either, but that you are just bringing a quick hi from Representative Everett, and we would love to hear from you. I bet she's
there. We go. Okay.
Oh,
I can finally unmute. There you go. Hi, everyone. Yes, a little bit last minute, but that's kind of how these things go. Terrence is upset that he can't be here tonight. He told me this morning, I think I'm going to miss my second event because of a late session, again, with Neighbors on Call. And he does, and we all do appreciate you so much, and and the cycles that you've helped Terrence with have been immeasurable, and we can't thank you enough for all that you've done. He is sitting in listening to the Republicans tout how wonderful their budget is right now. So I think we should all be grateful we're on this call and not sitting in the chambers with him right now. But we do appreciate everybody's help, and I'm glad that you're able to do this for us here. And to echo what Vicki said, when Terrence ran in 2016, we were disappointed in that, but we were happy to come back in 2018. But as Vicki said, this is a very predominantly, upper middle class, mid to upper middle class white area. It has a lot. Obviously, Rollsville is one of the places that's grown, I don't even know, 500% in the last 10 years, and so we don't know what these maps are going to look like once the Republicans start drawing the district again. So we're hoping for a good one for Terrence, but we do appreciate everything everybody's doing.
Thank you so much for popping in from all the millions of things I'm sure you have going on at home.
That's perfect.
And it's wonderful to meet you for the first time.
Thank you very much.
Vicki, I'd like to throw another question to you based on what you learned from phone calls during the fall. What are some of the major issues that, seem most important to the voters in Terrence's district?
Yeah, so a big one that we discussed, and I think it played really well in the district, was education. It's a lot of, families age children or school age children in the district. So families are really concerned with the public education opportunities for their children. And so I'm sure Jennifer would agree that that's a really big one. And the environment, also huge. The discussion of clean air, clean water, just once again, playing to the fact that a lot of people are concerned about what the future will look like for their children and want to make sure that their district and state is safe and stays clean for future generations. And then I don't know what Terrence's opponent's going to look like next time around, but something we discussed too is people are they're not looking for a very Trumpy conservative Republican. I would have been a little more concerned in 2020 if his opponent hadn't been so far to the right, because people really just want a nice, respectful, clear-headed, not extreme person representing them in their district, and Terrence was that perfect person. So yeah, just really sort of playing to the fact that Terrence is just a great guy who really cares about the district. He has a family, cares about education, the environment, I'd say is top. Jennifer, I don't know if you have any other thoughts actually living in the district.
No, I think Vicki's right. Education is a big thing here. And unfortunately, this area has been inundated with charter schools. And so Terrence does have to walk a pretty fine line during campaign season on that. And his motto, and as is mine too, is that, sure, if you want school choice, that's great, but make the public schools an actual choice and the best choice for our kids and to fund them. And so that's one of the main things here, as well as the environment and clean water. And like Vicki said, his opponent this time around was Trump, right? He was just Trump in House District 35. And so I don't think the voters were looking for something like that. It was definitely, had it been a moderate Republican, and if it is a moderate Republican this time around, it definitely will be a harder fight if it's, the district looks similar to what it is now.
I think that's a good segue to what we're going to talk about when we call, which we just wanted, and Amy and Bree are going to talk a lot more about what to expect during the phone banks. But a big piece of this is just name recognition and letting constituents know that they do have a nice representative who is there to support them with the things that are most important to them. And so the script is really so simple. It's just saying, do you have any state agency, I'm not saying it well, Amy and Bray can help me when you're speaking, but any issues that you need help with, like motor vehicles or veterans affairs kind of issues that he could assist with. That's what his office is there for, giving them his information about that over the phone, and then saying, what do you most want me to be fighting for in Raleigh? And that's really it. Very simple. We're not asking for anything. We're not asking for a vote. We're really just letting people know Representative Everett does care about you and what you need. So hopefully that is the kind of messaging and voter and name recognition that matches what you're saying is needed.
Yeah, and just to ladder off, the fact that you all are starting so early is a huge, huge help. I think a lot of the times these calls happen the week before, not with Neighbors on Call, but just generally calls will happen the week before the election. And like the fact that Terrence has the opportunity, he's in office to create a relationship and have you all calling into his district this early is going to make such a huge difference. I mean, his name ID is just going to go way up with that. So very, very happy to hear that you all are helping with that.
Thank you both so much for jumping in.
Oh,
last
yes.
minute.
Perfect.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Likewise, it takes the whole village. And we know that Terrence will be there in person on Sunday and at every phone bank. So, I mean, barring anything like this, I guess, happening again. So everyone will have a chance to hear him in person, no matter what happens tonight. And Amy and Bree, let me pass it over to you to tell us more about what we can all expect during the phone banks and why we're doing what we're doing.
All right, thanks, Becca. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you to Neighbors on Call for working with us. We're so happy to partner with you on this, and thankful to all the volunteers who are making this happen. And as Becca mentioned, Bree and I are the founders of FlipNC. We're not here in that capacity, and I know that some of you are very familiar with what our background is with FlipNC. Some of you have no idea who we are, so I will just provide a little bit of background on that. But FlipNC has been on hiatus since the election, so Bree and I are thrilled to work with Neighbors on Call. I'm just going to open my PowerPoint here, just for our bit of background here. So like Neighbors on Call, FlipNC was formed as an all-volunteer organization in the wake of the 2016 election for the purpose of running year-round voter outreach focused primarily on state-level races. And one way we differed from NOC is that FlipNC has operated as an independent organization working outside the party structure. So we ran voter outreach for the better part of the 4 years up until the last election, for both year-round for both the 2018 and 2020 elections. That included year-round canvassing, lit drop, phone banking, text banking. And as an independent organization, we had total flexibility to test and innovate. And we did so with a volunteer experience very much in mind. And so we also have a very heavy analytic background. We run as much of our voter outreach as possible using an experimental design so that we can test what works with which voters and when. And when we say with which voters, that's looking across a number of characteristics, including demographics, partisan lean, likelihood to vote. And evaluation of our 2018 voter outreach was especially valuable because we were able to experiment during a blue moon election year. So with no federal or major statewide candidate at the top of the ticket in North Carolina, we were not at a high saturation point with voter outreach, and that really allowed us to isolate the effects of exactly what our voter outreach was doing and cut out a lot of noise. And we also learned a lot about how to run large-scale voter outreach on a shoestring budget with 0 paid staff, which is unfortunately something that our legislators will need information about to do year-round voter outreach. So for the 2020 election, we were able to, just all volunteer organization, make 400,000 calls to voters and send 1.4 million texts to voters in competitive districts across the state. And so we're super excited to take what we learned in the past 4 years and work with Neighbors on Call to develop a model and toolkit that can help support Democratic incumbents in critical districts statewide to run their own voter outreach. So the toolkit that we're working to create will include resources and guidance for multiple forms of voter outreach, including my first love, canvassing. But for the purposes of this pilot, phone banking is ideal. It gives us a much more controlled environment for testing and refining our tools and processes. It allows us to run a series of phone banks in quick succession so that we can be collecting and implementing feedback along the way, iterating in a very short period of time, so that we can come out of this with a really great toolkit for incumbents and future Democratic challengers. And just generally, phone banking is a critical tool for our toolkit. While there is no substitute for face-to-face interactions, phone banking definitely has its unique perks. So we can run and support phone banking anywhere, any part of the state, including both places that are too far away to regularly travel and those we can't navigate on foot. And that's not just for rural areas. There are definitely very suburban districts that have parts of them that are not walkable at all, and we need to be able to reach those voters as well. It's also an important first touch for those that we can reach on foot. So the more voters hear from us, the more we're engaging with them and finding opportunities to connect, the more engaged they'll be and the more likely they will be to vote. We also love phone banking because it's a way that out-of-state volunteers can join us and support competitive races in North Carolina. And volunteers who work on these phone banks will gain experience that they can use to support candidates in any part of the state. And that's on both phone banking and other types of voter outreach like canvassing. And so for this incumbent protection program, we'll be targeting very left-leaning voters. So those are people with a partisan score of 70 or above on the scale from 0, which is very right-leaning, to 100, which is very left-leaning. And this set of voters has an average score of 94. And what that means is that for every 100 voters we turn out, that nets 88 votes for Democrats. So turnout efforts aimed at more partisan voters are more turning out folks than efforts aimed at turning out folks in the middle. The folks in the middle tend to be more apathetic. They're harder to turn out. And when they turn out, they are not as likely to vote our way. Certainly we want to focus on, when we have conversations with those voters, we want to make sure that we have name recognition, that we're talking about the importance of these down ballot races. But for this particular effort, what we're doing is trying to connect with our people, and especially less reliable voters. So that's the other big voter focus for this campaign. First of all, we'll be focusing on folks who are either new 2020 voters or sporadic voters who maybe only vote in presidential elections or just voted for the first time this year. That's the low-hanging fruit, folks who have already demonstrated a willingness to vote. And we just need to help them understand the importance of voting in other elections aside from the presidential. So in 2016, nearly 400,000 voters statewide cast ballots in the 2016 election, and then left-leaning voters, very left-leaning, the 70 and above folks, did not turn out in the 2018 midterm. So there's a lot of opportunity there that we want to tap into. And then our next priority is reaching registered voters who didn't vote in 2020. Sometimes it's easier to make a local connection on why they should vote. But whether we get to that group during the pilot will depend on how many volunteers we have and how many calls we can make. So one unfortunate thing about the way traditional voter outreach efforts operate is that voter outreach during the traditional GOTV period is really only effective at increasing turnout among higher propensity voters. And it's only slightly more effective with high propensity voters than early voter outreach. In contrast, early contact, so well outside the traditional election period, when you're not asking for anything and just making a connection with a voter, that's much more effective at turning out low propensity voters. So here we can see in the last midterm, we had voter contact starting in 2017. We're looking at the increase in turnout among folks we did not contact. So we saw everyone increased in turnout overall, with the increase in turnout among those we did contact. And the difference for those we contacted in 2017 was 25 points versus those we contacted in 2018 was 12 points. So we had a much bigger effect when we contacted these low propensity voters. These are those very left-leaning voters that are unlikely to vote in a midterm. Much more effective when we contacted them early, didn't ask them for anything, just talked with them about what mattered and connected that with their state level representation. And in fact, we saw no effect on turnout among low propensity left-leaning voters when we contacted them during the traditional GOTV period the month before the election. So we're really focused here on this specific set of voters, and we really, really need to reach them early with a very conversational connect with the voter approach. And so with that background, I'm going to turn it over to Bree to talk about how all of this will work.
Thanks, Amy. So let's talk about some of the goals of our early voter outreach. We are, as you can tell, we are pretty evangelical about doing this work early and outside of elections. And so we really think that by contacting these folks early and in the way that we're doing it, we're going to be accomplishing a lot on sort of a lot of different levels. First of all, we will be connecting with and supporting people who are at sort of the edges of political engagement. We're not calling people who vote in every election. We're calling people who maybe are, like Amy said, not regular voters, not that connected, and we'll be connecting what's happening at the state level to their daily lives by having authentic conversations with them and leading that conversation along to understand what's important to them. Folks in this group are often not aware of what's even happening at the state level. They don't often know who their reps are. They don't necessarily even understand sometimes how the state government functions. And so they're not always aware of the role that it plays or the impact that it has on their day-to-day lives. So by engaging with them and asking them what they care about and what state level issues they support or they care about, we'll be showing them through those conversations what their state level representatives do and why it's important in their lives. So this is the kind of early voter outreach that we did in 2017 and 2018 when we were canvassing for the 2018 midterms. And we know that it's really effective at ultimately turning out this group of voters to vote in the election. And also, we know that voting begets voting. So once you build the habit of voting by turning out these presidential year voters in a midterm, we're helping them build their voting muscle, make voting a habit, and that's how you become a regular voter. And hopefully they'll kind of step through the ladder of engagement on that and ultimately vote in their local elections and volunteer for campaigns. But we are also, as several people have mentioned, we'll be increasing name recognition for state reps, which helps ensure that when voters do turn out, they see that name on the ballot and they vote the full ballot. When people go into that voting booth, a lot of folks, don't do the full research on everyone on the ballot. But if they knew that name and they had a good conversation with someone who said the name Terrence Everett, they're going to vote for him, especially the folks that we're calling. And so also really importantly, we're going to be collecting data that will be available to all Democrats running in that area, not just the campaign that collected it. So that is something that we as volunteers can be sure that we aren't duplicating efforts and that those who are on the same side as us, we can help each other win. That's something that has been a significant issue on the Democratic side in North Carolina. We've certainly heard it from campaigns and from volunteers that this issue of where does the data go and how is it shared is a big issue. And so Representative Everett and anyone else who participates in this program will agree to share the data across campaigns so that when we're collecting data for Representative Everett, we're also collecting data that State Senator Sarah Crawford can use to inform her reelection campaign. Do you want to go to the next slide? So we're going to talk now a little bit about how we phone bank. I know there's a lot of folks on this call who are like really gung-ho canvassers, and I'm with you. I really love being face-to-face with people. But I have acquired a love of phone banking through the way that we've been doing it, because it is also still about having a connection with people, and we've built this kind of a program so that we can maximize our opportunity to have good conversations. So this is not your typical campaign phone bank. You won't be getting targets of the number of calls you have to make or pressure to talk to as many voters as possible and run through the script. Those kinds of campaigns do one thing well, and that's give the campaign inflated numbers that they can report back to donors. I mean, that's why we have those sort of like metrics that there's all this pressure to hit during traditional campaigns. But what those kinds of calls don't do well, and what those kinds of campaigns don't do well, is really engage voters on a human level. So we're here to make genuine human-to-human connections with constituents to make them feel supported and heard and understood, and bring them into the political process to make them, interested in engaging in the political process, because what they say matters. We're also not asking them for anything in these phone banks. We are not asking them for money. We are not asking them for their vote. We're just talking with them about what matters to them and offering to support to anyone who needs help, maybe with navigating state agencies or anything that Representative Everett's office can help them with. And don't worry, volunteers are not expected to be knowledgeable about that. You don't have to know, you don't have to be able to answer questions for them. Although if you want to connect on the human level and you know the answer to a question, you're invited to do that on these phone banks. But we'll just be connecting them with resources and offering to have their legislator follow up if needed. Again, it's really about an authentic conversation and meeting people where they are. And it's much more fun and gratifying to a volunteer experience than calling and, asking if we can count on your vote. So this is, in our view, this is really the art of voter contact as much as the science. I mean, we're very data focused, but this is about authentically engaging with people as humans. The old saying goes, and I'm going to say it wrong, but a person won't remember what you tell them, but they'll remember how you made them feel. When people feel heard, they're more likely to engage, and that's a big goal that we have with these phone banks. So let's go on to the next slide. So this is kind of the outline of the script. Like Amy said, or I think Becca said, it's a very basic script. We want them to talk as much as we talk, if possible. That's not always possible, but we at least want them to know that we want their opinions and we want them to be heard. So the phone banking script, we'll ask them, do you have any questions, or is there anything you're concerned about? Are you working, with a state agency or in any way that the government works that you'd like Representative Everett to contact you about? Is there any way that your representative can help you do something you need to do as it relates to the state government? A lot of people are dealing with things with the government right now, whether it's unemployment or the real IDs. So just asking that question can get some interesting answers and it offers a chance to engage. We also want to know what issues your state representative, you want your representative to be working on. What are the issues important to you, and what do you want Representative Everett to be focused on at the legislature? And answer and listen to the answer and engage as a human. And then would you like us to keep you posted about issues that affects constituents in the area? So an invitation or an opportunity for them to kind of opt into being kept in the loop is important. And now we'll talk a little bit about the structure of the phone bank. So what is that phone bank going to look like? So as I mentioned, our phone banks are pretty different from what you might be used to. We do provide a lot of support, and we like for things to be fun and lively. If you've ever come to a Flip Canvas or a Neighbors on Call Canvas, we like to keep those fun and lively, and the phone banks are the same. So the phone banks are 2 hours long. We join by Zoom. We all come together in a Zoom, and we stay connected in the Zoom the whole time. We just disconnect from the audio as we make calls, and the phone calls are also happening through the computer. So you can ask questions in the chat while you're phone banking, and it creates a good sort of camaraderie, and you feel supported, and you are supported. Every phone bank begins with a full training for new volunteers. As you gain more experience and you return for your second or third phone bank, we'll start with a quick update for returning volunteers, and then you can go ahead and start making calls if you like. But we'll always have that full training, which takes the whole beginning part takes about 30 minutes to get trained on the tool and everything, but you don't have to do that once you're comfortable. We use an auto dialer to make calls. If you've never phone banked with an auto dialer before, it really is a game changer. Instead of spending your time dialing phone numbers and listening and waiting for someone to pick up, or hearing the first few lines of a voice message and having to decide whether you're going to leave a message, instead of that, the tool dials the numbers for you, and the more people that are phone banking, the faster the dialer works. So it's dialing numbers all the time, and it just connects you when someone picks up. So you might just wait 20, 30 seconds between calls. And then as soon as someone picks up, you can launch into the script. So we can reach a lot more voters in a short period of time that way. And then when we do connect with the voter, we can take our time and enjoy the conversation, and we're not trying to rush through to make a certain number of calls. We have experience in every phone bank. We will have some experienced volunteers available for support throughout the phone bank who can answer questions in the chat, or if you're having technical problems. I mean, there is a learning curve because, you know, any technology, you got to learn the first time. But it's really it's not hard. And we have people who will go into a breakout room with you and work with you one-on-one to make sure you're comfortable with the technology. And at the end of the phone bank, we'll all come back together and debrief and share stories. And there's almost always a good story about a great conversation someone had or an interesting conversation. And then importantly, we'll get your feedback. We'll also share a survey at the end of every phone bank. And if you want to go to the next slide, feedback is a really important part of this process. Volunteer participation in this pilot and your feedback is a critical piece of this. Of course, we need people to be making these calls so that we can reach as many voters as we can in Representative Everett's district. That is real. We need him to be reelected, and this is definitely going to help make sure that happens. We also need as many people as we can helping us to test and refine this model, because we are developing and finalizing a toolkit that we hope will be used to put this model out statewide and help lots of other people win elections in the state. So while this is a voter outreach model for canvassing, phone banking, and text banking that we have heavily tested and refined, what is new here is that this model is being used to contact constituents on behalf of a legislator. So that is a little bit different. And it's also something that we hope to be able to hand to a incumbent or a volunteer or a group of volunteers, and that they can take it and run with it. And so we really need feedback on what worked, what didn't work, what support do volunteers need for this to be easy to implement for people. We've done a lot of thinking and collaborating on what we think will work well under these new conditions, but there's really no substitute for direct experience, and your feedback will absolutely be taken and helpful in making the toolkit as useful as it can possibly be. And we'll be looking for feedback on everything from the training and the script to the kind of support and the tools the volunteers need to the quality of the voter lists. Every aspect of this phone bank we'll want feedback on. So, I mean, we hope that y'all will join us and help make these phone banks successful, and make a lot of calls and have great conversations, and ultimately help make the toolkit that we're going to be using for voter outreach, and that we hope will be, able to allow this kind of voter outreach to be scaled across the state the best that it can be. So that's what I've got. And thank you all so much for listening.
Bree and Amy, thank you so much for that. That was, I think, really helpful for everyone to know what to expect starting on Sunday with the phone banks. And I just wanted to make sure that I had 2 key points, Amy, just to reiterate 2 things and make sure that I'm saying them right. That there are 400,000 left-leaning voters who voted in 2016 in the presidential, but did not turn out in 2018. And that's who we're thinking of as our voters for this. They're the ones who we can have the greatest effect on, and that we have the biggest effect talking to them early and not late.
Yes, all that is exactly right.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure I was summarizing those points correctly, because that is guiding who we're calling, so that we know that we're being effective. Thank you very much. We will take questions from everyone in a moment, but first we want to ask you to please sign up for phone banks. So there's 5 starting Sunday, and Susan's going to put up that slide, and I will put the link in the chat in one moment. And common 400,000 left-leaners in this category in the entire state. That's not all the voters.
That's just folks 70 and above in partisan lean. So the super left-leaning voters.
Thank you. So please go ahead and do that right now. It's really quick to sign up. If you signed up on the Neighbors on Call website already, that's fine too. That's a separate link. But they both end up getting you to the same place in the end. So there's the link in the chat. Patience has, while you're doing that, and please, that is the most important thing, is pick phone banks that work for you. And Patience, who's one of the chapter leaders for Neighbors on Call, has been watching the chat, and I'm sure there are a bunch of questions in there. I don't know if we'll be able to answer the ones that are specifically about Terrence and policy and his stance on things, but I did see one that I'll just answer real quick about the energy bill, which is he didn't like it. And on Sunday, we'll have more, we'll have time with Terrence to find out more about his positions. So Patience, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Becca?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I wanted to answer a question just on behalf of NOC from Claudia. She said, canvassing is not, are we considering in-person canvassing? And I just wanted to clarify that that's not part of this pilot project, but it is in our plans for future efforts. Lloyd wants to know, so many people are irritated by phone calls. What information do you have that phone banking has a positive effect rather than a negative effect?
So I mentioned we made 400,000 calls for the 2020 elections. The people who do not want to talk on the phone, get off the phone right away. If you can get them past the initial couple of sentences, it is a positive conversation. You don't really have much of a negative impact in the few seconds that you have asked for their time. We're very polite about it. A lot of people make their own intro and we'll say things like, you know, we're not asking for donations, or we're not asking for anything. We're just calling to make sure that you are. So you get to a quick intro, and generally, because we're offering them something versus asking them for something, if they don't want to talk, they're generally not annoyed. A lot of people are pleasantly surprised. As a person who came into phone banking really not feeling like I wanted to phone bank, I was absolutely shocked at how many people wanted to talk and how many really good conversations I had. And frankly, as a person who's very awkward on the phone, I did start each phone bank that I made calls on a bit nervous. Then I would have a conversation and go, oh, wow, okay, that was really great. Then you sort of have like a high of the conversation that went so well. And then you go into the next one and it's you know, even better usually. So yeah, we generally, the people who don't want to talk to us don't talk to us.
Amy, there are lots of questions about the auto dialer, and you've answered a few in the chat already. One that I don't think you answered was, with the auto dialer, do we still see information about the person we're contacting? And someone else had asked us before the event about the delay that there is sometimes in auto dialing where you can't necessarily see the name right away. Is that an issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes someone will say hello. So you do have information about the person. It shows up in the left panel. Sometimes they will say hello and you'll say, oh, hello, is this it? And then their name will show up. And so you have to be ready to sort of drag out that, oh, hi, how are you today? And then it shows up. It's not a huge delay. It's just, you'd like to see it before they say hello. And sometimes it's, you know, a second after. And then the information that you have about them in the left panel is whatever information we feed in when we put the voter lists in. So part of this, you know, we know what we've used in the past for phone banks, but part of running this pilot is, you know, if there are things people want to see, information that they want to have, that's something that you can tell us and that we can add for the next phone bank. And that's what we did for 2020. But we might find that there are different fields that folks will find helpful for this.
Okay. Claudia wants to know, please tell us what's new in this toolkit.
Well, what's new about this toolkit is that it's an open resource for our incumbents and then down the road Democratic candidates to use. These are basically the exact, we're making a toolkit of the tools that we used outside of the party to run voter outreach, large scale with just volunteers. And what we're trying to do is make this available and easy to use for incumbents. So there's not a lot that's new, except that it's now being used for constituent engagement and outreach with the legislator, whereas we were on the outside of it before, and we think that there are going to be things that come up that we haven't anticipated that we'll want to include and prepare for when we're passing along this toolkit.
Okay. Fran wants me to, who is our out-of-state leader, wants me to make sure everybody understands that you don't have to be at this meeting in order to participate in the phone banks. We're hoping that you'll go off and recruit other people to come to this, come to the phone banks, and they will be trained at the beginning of the phone banks. What are, with regard to the script, you mentioned that we're going to be asking people if they're having an issue with a state agency. What are some of the state agencies that Representative Everett could help them with?
Well, like I mentioned, I mean, it could be anything from like the unemployment office, like the DMV. I wouldn't be surprised if there might be some issues with schools or things like that. You know, in the Office of Environmental Quality. I mean, I'm not really sure how often that would come up, but anything that would impact the anything that would be run by the state or issues that the state has, rent assistance, evictions, things like that, voter registration or issues with voting. Those are the ones that spring to mind, but.
Okay. Kenneth wants to know, can you give us some starter or lead-in phrases as an introduction to each call?
Like how you would start the call? You
Yeah.
wanna take that, Amy?
Yeah, you'll see a script on your screen, and it's not just going to have those questions, it's going to have some suggested text around it. Generally, what people will do is use those from the start, and then once they've gotten comfortable, they'll start to fall into their own phrases that they use. What we found is that some people have a lot of success with certain types of language, and they'll share that, and we'll end up adjusting our scripts. And so, you know, we want this to feel natural. And you know, I keep saying this, I know, but a huge part of this is just people testing it, giving us feedback, and us making adjustments as needed. The same thing with, there are certain types of state agencies that we can be prepared for specifically, but then others will come up, and you know, you will have a script so that you can say, certainly we will be happy to call you back to help you with that. And then we'll know this might be something that we want to add to our cheat sheet of information to have more prepared for next time. So A, we will be prepared for all kinds of things, and B, we need your feedback so that we can improve on that preparedness that we're coming in with as part of this pilot.
Judy asked if Representative Everett, or you know, the state representative, can help with rent assistance. Is that one of the issues at a state level?
I would think that he would be able to help direct someone to the right place at a minimum. So I think that is a state issue, especially with the NC HOPE program. Being
NC
state
HOPE, yeah.
administered.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that we have that there is a question that pertains to Representative Everett's district, and I don't know if anybody here could answer that. Donna wanted to know how his district is regarding COVID and masking as an issue. I guess Vicky's not here, and so that's something that
we've got some folks in the we've got some folks here from the district, and I don't know if they can unmute themselves. I see David Bland, is your hand raised to answer the question? Yeah, can we unmute David Bland?
Okay, as far as the district is concerned, with the exception of eastern Wake Forest area, our rate is very good. Like, for example, here in 1310, we are like 75 to 80%. So it varies, but on the east side of the district, we've got more problems.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
And I think this is just a very good example of why it's so important that we are able to partner with folks locally who can provide local context for us. And that's something that we'll have on each of these phone banks, so that those of us who are joining from outside the district and those of us who are joining from inside the district can share information and resources.
Okay, Judith asked if Representative Everett can help with COVID questions. And I know from our canvassing with Representative Hurtado and others that he's done a lot of work to point people to vaccine information for sure, and other information that's available through the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to you, Becca.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, if you're from Wake Forest, Roseville area, would you just put that in the chat? Because we really want to know folks who are from the district. We're so grateful that you are here. And Vicki and Jen, who I'm not sure are still on, thank you so much for being, oh, Susan, sorry, did you want to say something?
You buzzed for a minute.
Oh, I buzzed. I don't know why. Amy and Bree, thank you so much for working with us on this project. And to everyone who signed up to Phone Bank, we will see you sometime over the next few weeks. Thank you to Jessica, Camille, Emily, Sharon, Deb. I can't keep up with everybody. So many folks. Cheryl. Thank you very much. And David, we know, is also from that area. So thank you so much, Ken. We will see everyone at the phone banks.
And bring your
Thank you so
friends. Like we've been saying, this is, we would like to grow the team. So please, if you know people who would like to join in, share the information with them or contact us and we'll make sure they get the information. So it takes several villages to do this thing.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.